The lights in the agricultural dome flickered as Day One shut down the last hydroponic system for the night. His hands were dirty from working with the nutrient solutions all day, and his back ached from bending over the plant beds. He was tired, but it was a good kind of tired. The kind that came from honest work. He grabbed his jacket from the hook near the exit and walked out into the corridor. The station was quiet at this hour. Most people were either eating dinner in the mess hall or already in their quarters watching entertainment programs. Day One preferred the quiet. He liked being alone with his thoughts. Instead of taking the main corridor back to his quarters, he took his usual shortcut through the lower maintenance levels. The path was longer, but fewer people used it. Down here, the walls were plain metal instead of the painted panels of the upper levels. The lighting was dimmer. Some people found it creepy, but Day One found it peaceful. He was halfway through the maintenance sector when he heard it. A small sound, like a bird chirping, but not quite right. It was weak and scared sounding. Day One stopped walking and listened. There it was again, coming from somewhere ahead. He walked forward slowly, following the sound. Near the waste recycling entrance, behind some old equipment that nobody had bothered to move, he found the source of the noise. It was an alien creature. A small one, about the size of a cat. Day One had seen the adult versions of this species around the station before. They were called Talvari, and they were tall and elegant, with scales that changed colors when they moved. But this one was tiny. A baby, he realized. A hatchling. The little creature was pressed against the wall, shivering. Its scales were a dull gray color, not shimmering like the adults. One of its sides looked damaged. A scale was cracked, and pale blue liquid was seeping out. The hatchling looked up at Day One with large amber eyes. It made that chirping sound again. Softer this time. Day One looked around. The corridor was empty, but he could see two adult Talvari walking in the distance. At the far end of the hallway, they were clearly aware of the hatchling. One of them glanced in Day One's direction, made eye contact, and shook its head slowly. Then, both aliens turned and walked away. Something felt wrong about this. Why would they leave a baby here, injured and alone? Day One didn't know much about Talvari culture. He kept to himself mostly, worked his shifts, and went home. But he knew that leaving an injured baby anywhere was wrong. The hatchling chirped again. It tried to move toward him but stumbled. Its small wings, folded against its back, trembled. Day One made his decision. He took off his jacket and knelt down beside the creature. "Hey there, little one," he said softly. "Let me help you." The hatchling flinched when he reached out, but it didn't try to run. Maybe it was too hurt to run. Maybe it was too tired. Day One moved slowly, carefully wrapping his jacket around the small body. The creature was warm to the touch, warmer than he expected. It weighed almost nothing. He stood up, cradling the wrapped hatchling against his chest. It made a small trilling sound and pressed its head against his shirt. Day One could feel it shaking. "It's okay," he whispered. He walked quickly back to his quarters, taking the maintenance corridors the whole way to avoid running into anyone. The hatchling stayed quiet, only making small sounds, now and then. By the time Day One reached his door and let himself in, the creature had stopped shaking as much. His quarters were small. Just a bedroom, a tiny bathroom, and a kitchen area that was barely big enough for one person. He didn't have much furniture: a bed, a chair, a small table, and a shelf with a few books. That was it. Day One set the hatchling down gently on his bed and unwrapped the jacket. In the better light of his quarters, he could see the injury more clearly. The cracked scale was on the creature's left side, just below where its small wing attached to its body. The blue liquid had mostly stopped flowing, but the area around the crack looked swollen. He went to his bathroom and grabbed his emergency medical kit. It was designed for humans, but he figured the basic supplies would work for most species. He wet a clean cloth with warm water and carefully cleaned the wound. The hatchling whimpered, but held still. "Good," Daewon said quietly. He applied some antiseptic gel to the crack and covered it with a small bandage. The bandage looked ridiculous on the alien creature, but it would have to do. When he was finished, the hatchling looked up at him and made a soft cooing sound. Daewon realized the creature was probably hungry. He went to his kitchen and looked through his food supplies. He didn't have anything that looked appropriate for an alien baby. Then he remembered the protein paste he kept for emergencies. It was nutritionally complete and safe for most species. At least, that's what the package said. He squeezed some of the paste into a small dish and brought it back to the bed. The hatchling sniffed at it, turned its head away, then looked back at the dish. It seemed uncertain. Daewon dipped his finger in the paste and held it out. "It's okay. It's food. I promise it won't hurt you." The hatchling stared at his finger for a long moment. Then, it leaned forward and cautiously licked the paste. Its eyes widened. It licked again, more eagerly this time. Then it dove into the dish and started eating like it hadn't had food in days. Maybe it hadn't. Daewon watched the creature eat and felt something tighten in his chest. He had been alone for 3 years now. 3 years since the transport accident that took his parents and his younger sister. 3 years of just working and sleeping and trying not to think too much. 3 years of being careful not to get close to anyone. And now here was this small, helpless creature, eating from a dish on his bed like it belonged there. When the hatchling finished eating, it looked up at him and made a happy chirping sound. Daewon couldn't help but smile. "You're welcome," he said. He grabbed his spare pillow and set it on the bed. The hatchling immediately climbed onto it and turned in 3 circles before curling up into a small ball. Its eyes began to close. Daewon sat in his chair and watched the creature fall asleep. He knew he should probably contact someone. The station authorities, maybe. Or the Talvari embassy. Someone who knew what to do with an abandoned alien baby. But it was late now. Whatever had happened, whatever the reason, this hatchling was alone, in a maintenance corridor. It could wait until morning. Right now, the little creature was safe and fed and sleeping peacefully. Daewon would figure out the rest tomorrow. He dimmed the lights and got ready for bed, moving quietly so he wouldn't wake his unexpected guest. As he lay down on his side of the bed, careful not to disturb the pillow where the hatchling slept, he heard it make one more small sound. A quiet, contented trill, despite everything. Despite all the questions and concerns that would come with morning. Daewon felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. He felt needed. He closed his eyes and let himself drift off to sleep, unaware that his simple act of kindness had just changed the course of his entire life. Daewon woke to the sound of knocking. Hard, insistent knocking that made his door rattle in its frame. He sat up quickly, confused, and still half asleep. The small hatchling on the pillow beside him chirped in alarm and scrambled closer to him. The knocking came again, louder this time. Then his door chime sounded. Not the normal chime that meant someone was requesting entry. The emergency override chime that meant someone with authority was coming in whether he liked it or not. The door slid open. 6 tall figures entered his quarters. They were Talvari, but not like the ones Daewon usually saw around the station. These wore elaborate robes that seemed to shimmer with their own light. Their scales weren't just 1 or 2 colors. They shifted through deep purples, golds, and silvers as they moved. They filled his small quarters completely, making the space feel impossibly tiny. The hatchling made a frightened chirping sound and scrambled behind Daewon, pressing against his back. He could feel the small creature trembling again. Daewon stood up slowly, his heart pounding. "Can I help you?" The tallest of the Talvari stepped forward. Her scales were tipped with silver, and her eyes were ancient and knowing. When she spoke, her voice was clear, and she used perfect human language. Human Day One, she said. You have done what we could not. You have shown compassion where our law forbade it. Day One blinked. I don't understand. I just found an injured hatchling. I was going to contact your embassy this morning to return. You cannot return what was meant to be abandoned. Another Talvari interrupted. This one was broader, with scars across his scales and eyes that looked like they had seen many battles. The hatchling you sheltered is Prince Tal, heir to the Talvari throne. Day One felt his legs go weak. He sat back down on the bed. What? What? The silver-tipped Talvari continued. I am Elder Kyra. These are Elders Vin, Sora, Hana, Quan, and Lyra. We are the council that governs our people. She gestured to each of the others in turn. And we are here because you have changed everything. Day One shook his head. I didn't change anything. I just helped a baby who was hurt. Anyone would have done the same. No, Elder Vin said, his voice hard. They would not have. Did you not see the adults who walked past? Did you not notice that the hatchling was left in a place where many of our people passed through? Day One thought back to the two Talvari he had seen, the ones who had deliberately looked away. I saw them. I thought it was strange, but I didn't know why. Elder Sora stepped forward. She carried a tall staff embedded with glowing crystals. It is time you understood our ways, human. Among our people, there is an ancient tradition called the trial of rejection. Every royal hatchling must endure it. She tapped her staff on the floor, and the crystals began to glow brighter. Images appeared in the air above it, showing scenes from Talvari history. Day One saw other hatchlings, alone in various places, struggling to survive. The trial is simple, Elder Sora continued. The royal hatchling is taken from the nest and left alone in a public place for one full night. If the hatchling survives until morning without help, it is deemed worthy to one day rule. If it perishes, then it was not strong enough. And if someone tries to help, she paused. If someone tries to help, the hatchling is considered weak and unworthy of the throne. Day One felt anger rising in his chest. That's barbaric. He's just a baby. He was hurt and scared, and we know, Elder Kyra said softly. Many of us have disagreed with this law for generations, but it is ancient. It has governed our people for 3,000 years. To break it means chaos. Our entire society is built on these traditions. Then why are you here? Day One demanded. If I've made him unworthy, why bring your whole council to my quarters? Elder Hana, who had been silent until now, spoke. Her voice was gentle. Because you are not one of our people. Elder Kyra nodded. The law is clear. No Talvari may help a royal hatchling during the trial of rejection. For 3,000 years, this law has held. Every royal child has faced the trial. Some survived, some did not. But never, in all our history, has someone from beyond our people intervened. There is a clause, Elder Lyra added. She was the youngest of the elders, her scales still vibrant and bright. A clause so old that many believed it would never come to pass. It states, if one beyond the people shows mercy unto the rejected, the cosmos itself has chosen. That one becomes the bonded guardian, and the hatchling shall rule with the wisdom of 2 worlds. The words hung in the air. Day One looked at each of the elders in turn, trying to understand what they were telling him. You're saying that because I helped him, I'm now. What? Responsible for him? More than responsible. Elder Vin said, you are bonded to him. By our law, you are now his guardian until he reaches maturity. You will guide him, teach him, protect him, and when he takes the throne, you will stand beside it as his most trusted advisor. Day One laughed, but there was no humor in it. This is crazy. I'm an agricultural engineer. I grow vegetables in water. I don't know anything about raising an alien prince, I don't know anything about your politics or your culture or how to prepare someone to rule an empire. You will learn, Elder Kyra said. We will teach you. And if I refuse? Day One asked quietly. The elders looked at each other. Finally, Elder Sora spoke. If you refuse the bond now, the law states that Prince Tyel must be returned to the trial. He will be placed alone once more. And this time, no one may help him. He will die. Day One. The law forbids us from taking him back unless his bonded guardian permits it. Day One felt the small creature press harder against his back. He reached behind and felt the hatchling's warm scales under his hand. The creature made a small, questioning sound. He thought about walking away. About going back to his simple life. His quiet routine. His safe solitude. He thought about the transport accident 3 years ago. About how he had promised himself never to care about anyone again because losing people hurt too much. But he also thought about finding this small creature abandoned and hurt. He thought about how it had looked at him with those large amber eyes, trusting him completely. He thought about how it had eaten from his hand and fallen asleep on his pillow like it belonged there. If I agree to this, Day One said slowly, what happens to him? To Tyel? Elder Kyra smiled, and for the first time, Day One saw warmth in her ancient eyes. He will be raised with love and wisdom. He will learn from both our people and yours. And when he is ready, he will become the greatest leader our empire has ever known, because he will rule not just with strength and tradition, but with the compassion you have shown him. Day One closed his eyes. He knew he didn't really have a choice. He couldn't let the hatchling die. But more than that, he realized he didn't want to. Somewhere in the few hours since he had found Tile, something had changed inside him. He opened his eyes and looked at Elder Kyra. Then I accept. I'll be his guardian. The small hatchling behind him chirped loudly, a happy sound this time. It scrambled over his shoulder and settled in his lap, looking up at him with bright eyes. The elders bowed deeply, all 6 of them together. Elder Kyra said, You are now Day One, bonded guardian of Prince Tile, heir to the Talvari throne. Your life, human, has just begun anew. The first week was chaos. Day One's small quarters became the center of attention for the entire station. Director Hajun, the administrator of New Haven Colony, visited within hours of the elders' announcement. He was a thin man, with nervous hands, that never stopped moving. This is unprecedented, Hajun said, pacing back and forth in the corridor outside Day One's quarters. Do you understand what this means? The Talvari Empire is one of the most powerful civilizations in this sector. Their future king is bonded to a human from our colony. The political implications are enormous. Day One stood with his arms crossed, watching Tael explore the corridor. The hatchling was more energetic now that his wound was healing. He chirped at everything he saw, his small wings fluttering with excitement. I didn't ask for this, Day One said quietly. I know, Hajun replied, stopping his pacing. He looked at Day One with something like sympathy. But it's happened anyway. And we need to make sure we handle this correctly. For everyone's sake. By the end of the week, Day One was moved to new quarters in the diplomatic section of the station. His new home was 5 times larger than his old one, with separate rooms for sleeping, living, and working. It had windows that looked out at the stars. It was beautiful and comfortable and completely overwhelming. Talvari attendants arrived to help with Tyle's care. They brought special foods, taught Day One about hatchling development, and answered his endless questions. But they made it clear that the primary responsibility was his. The bond meant he had to be the one to raise Tael, not them. Elder Kyra assigned someone to teach Day One about Talvari culture. Her name was Bo-Ra, and she was a keeper of knowledge. She was patient and kind, with soft gray scales and a gentle manner. She came every afternoon and taught Day One about Talvari history, customs, and traditions. Your people and mine are not so different, Bo-Ra said one day, as they sat in Day One's new living room. Tael was curled up on a cushion nearby, listening to her voice. We both value family. We both seek meaning in our lives. We both fear the unknown. But you have traditions like the trial of rejection, Day One said. Humans would never do something like that to a child. Bo-Ra tilted her head. Would they not? I have studied human history, Day One. I have read about trials of strength, tests of worthiness, children sent away to prove themselves. Every culture has its harsh traditions. The question is whether we have the wisdom to know when to keep them and when to let them go. Day One thought about that for a long time. As the weeks passed, something surprising happened. Day One and Tael began to understand each other. The hatchling couldn't speak human language yet, but he was learning. He made different sounds for different things. A high chirp meant he was happy. A low trill meant he was tired. A sharp clicking sound meant he was scared or uncertain, but it was more than just sounds. Day One began to feel things from Tael. Emotions that weren't his own, like echoes in his mind. When Tael was content, Day One felt warmth. When Tael was frightened, Day One felt a flutter of panic. Bo-Ra explained that this was the bond forming, a connection that went deeper than words. Tael copied everything Day One did. When Day One ate, Tael wanted to eat. When Day One went to sleep, Tael refused to settle until Day One was in bed first. One evening, Day One was preparing dinner when he realized Tael hadn't touched his food. What's wrong? Day One asked. Are you not hungry? Tael made a questioning chirp and looked at Day One's plate, then back at his own. Then Day One understood. You want me to eat first? Tael's eyes brightened. He chirped happily. From that day forward, they always ate together, at the same time. It became their routine, one of many small rituals that made them feel like a family. But not everyone was happy about the situation. 2 months after the bonding, a Talvari military ship arrived at the station. General Crix emerged with a delegation of traditionalist Talvari, who believed the ancient laws should never be questioned. Crix was intimidating. He was taller than most Talvari, with dark scales and cold eyes. He demanded a meeting with the Council of Elders, with Director Hajun, and with Day One himself. This bonding is an abomination, Crix declared during the meeting. A human cannot raise our prince. A human cannot understand our ways. This weakens our entire empire. Now, Elder Vin, who was also a military leader, stood to face Crix. The law is clear. The bonding is legitimate. The law is ancient and outdated. Crix shot back. It was written for a different time. We should not be bound by words carved in stone 3,000 years ago. And yet, those same ancient laws give you your rank and your authority, Elder Kira said calmly. You cannot choose which traditions to honor based on convenience. The argument went on for hours. Day One sat quietly, holding Tile in his lap, while powerful aliens debated his future. Finally, Crix announced that he would be calling for a formal tribunal to challenge the bonding. Among the humans, there was also trouble. Some colonists resented the attention and resources being directed toward Day One and Tael. A man named Jay Huan, who worked in the engineering department, began spreading rumors. He told people that Day One had planned the whole thing to gain power and influence. He knew what would happen, Jay Huan said loudly in the mess hall one day. He knew that if he helped the alien baby, he'd get rewarded. Now look at him, living in fancy quarters, getting special treatment. Meanwhile, the rest of us worked twice as hard for half the attention. Day One heard about the rumors but tried to ignore them. He had bigger concerns. Tael was growing quickly, and with growth came new challenges. The hatchling had nightmares almost every night, terrible dreams where he was alone and scared. He would wake up crying, making distressed sounds that broke Day One's heart. The only thing that calmed him was Day One's presence. Day One started sleeping with his hand resting on Tael's side, so the hatchling would know he wasn't alone even in sleep. 3 months after the bonding, Director Hajun organized a diplomatic dinner to celebrate the alliance between humans and Talvari. Both species attended, dressed in their finest clothes. Day One wore a simple suit, feeling uncomfortable and out of place among the dignitaries and officials. Tael, now larger and more confident, walked beside him. The hatchling's scales had started to show hints of color, pale golds and silvers that shimmered when he moved. The dinner was tense. Crix and his followers were there, watching everything with disapproving eyes. Jae-hwan, and some other resentful humans, sat at a corner table, whispering to each other. At one point during the meal, Tael wandered away from Daewon's side. He was curious about the decorations, especially a large sculpture made of crystal that sat on a pedestal near the windows. Daewon was talking to Bora when he felt it. A sudden spike of danger through the bond, a feeling that made his heart jump into his throat. He looked up and saw the sculpture tipping over. Tael was standing right beneath it, looking up with innocent curiosity as hundreds of pounds of crystal began to fall. Daewon didn't think. He just moved. He threw himself across the room, faster than he knew he could move, and grabbed Tael. He turned his body to shield the hatchling, and the sculpture crashed into his shoulder and back. Pain exploded through him. He heard people shouting, felt hands pulling him up, but all he cared about was the small creature pressed against his chest. "Are you hurt?" he gasped, checking Tael for injuries. Tael chirped frantically, his small claws gripping Daewon's shirt. He sent waves of concern through the bond, worried about Daewon, not himself. "I'm okay," Daewon said, even though his shoulder felt like it was on fire. "I'm okay." The room had gone completely silent. Everyone was staring at them. Crix's expression was unreadable. Jae-hwan looked shocked, but Elder Kyra was smiling. She walked over and placed her hand on Daewon's good shoulder. "The bond is proven," she announced loudly, so everyone could hear. "Proven in blood, offered freely. Let none question it again." The Talvari in the room all bowed their heads in respect. Even Crix, though his bow was slight and grudging. That night, as Daewon lay in bed with ice on his bruised shoulder, Tael curled up beside him and made soft, comforting sounds. The hatchling's small clawed hand rested on Daewon's arm, and through the bond came a feeling of pure love and gratitude. Daewon smiled, despite the pain. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever tribunals or tests or political battles they had to face, they would face them together. 3 months after the dinner incident, the formal summons arrived. The tribunal would be held on Talvar Prime, the Talvari homeworld. Daewon and Tael had 1 week to prepare for the journey. Daewon had never left the colony station before. Not since he arrived 6 years ago, running away from Earth and all its painful memories. The idea of traveling to an alien world filled him with anxiety, but he had no choice. If they didn't attend the tribunal, Crix would win by default. "What will they do to us?" Daewon asked Bora the night before departure. She was helping him pack, folding clothes carefully while Tael watched from his favorite cushion. "They will test the bond," she said. "They will try to determine if you are truly worthy to guide our future king. And if they decide, I'm not?" Bora was quiet for a moment. "Then, Tael will be taken from you. He will be raised by the traditional methods, and you will be sent home. The bond will be broken." Daewon looked at Tael. The hatchling had grown considerably over the past months. He was now the size of a large dog, with wings that could almost lift him off the ground for short glides. His scales shimmered with gold and silver, and his eyes held intelligence and awareness far beyond his age. "I won't let them take him," Daewon said quietly. The journey to Talvar Prime took 3 days on a Talvari ship. The vessel was beautiful, all flowing curves and organic shapes, completely different from human engineering. Daewon spent most of the trip in their cabin, watching Tael explore every corner with endless curiosity. On the 3rd day, they arrived. Daewon stood at the viewing window as the ship descended through the atmosphere, and his breath caught in his throat. Talvar Prime was stunning. Cities floated in the sky, held aloft by technology Daewon couldn't begin to understand. They glowed with soft light, connected by bridges of pure energy. Below them, forests of bioluminescent trees stretched to the horizon, pulsing with colors that shifted like breathing. Beautiful, isn't it? Elder Kyra said, appearing beside him. She had traveled with them to serve as their advocate at the tribunal. I've never seen anything like it, Day One admitted. Tyel pressed against the window, chirping excitedly and sending waves of wonder through the bond. They landed at the capital city, a floating metropolis called Talveris. Day One was given little time to appreciate the architecture or the culture. Within hours of landing, he was brought before the Empress Dowager. Her name was Vara, and she was Tal's grandmother. She sat on a throne made of living crystal that grew from the floor itself, and she was the most magnificent being Day One had ever seen. Her scales were pure white, shot through with veins of gold. Her eyes were ancient and knowing, holding thousands of years of wisdom and grief. Tyel made a small sound and hid behind Day One's legs. "Come here, child," Vara said, her voice echoing through the chamber. "Let me see you." Tyel didn't move. He gripped Day One's pant leg and stayed hidden. Vara's expression softened. "He fears me, his own grandmother, and he fears me." She turned her gaze to Day One. "But he trusts you, a human he has known for mere months, and he trusts you completely. Tell me, Day One of Earth, why should you be permitted to keep my grandson?" Day One swallowed hard. "Because I love him. Not because of who he'll become, but because of who he is now. A scared kid who needed help, and who gave me a reason to care about something again." Vara studied him for a long moment. "We shall see if that love is enough. The tribunal begins tomorrow." The tribunal was held in an ancient arena, open to the sky, with seats for thousands of witnesses. Day One stood in the center of the arena floor, feeling small and exposed. Tail stood beside him, his head held high despite his obvious nervousness. The Empress Dowager presided over the tribunal from a raised platform. Elder Kyra stood as their advocate. General Crix stood as their challenger. And the rest of the Council of Elders served as judges. "The human will face 3 trials," Vara announced. "The trial of knowledge, the trial of sacrifice, and the trial of unity. He must pass all 3 to maintain the bond. If he fails even one, Prince Tyel will be removed from his care and raised in the traditional manner." The first trial began immediately. Day One was questioned about Talvari history, culture, and law. Questions came from all directions. Rapid and complex. What were the founding principles of the empire? What did the colors of the royal scales signify? What were the proper rituals for addressing the council? Day One answered as best he could, drawing on everything Bo-Ra had taught him. He made mistakes, stumbled over some answers, but he showed that he had genuinely tried to learn. He showed respect for the culture and a desire to understand it. After 2 hours, the questioning ended. The elders conferred quietly among themselves. "The human has demonstrated adequate knowledge," Elder Sora announced. "He passes the first trial." Crix looked displeased but said nothing. The second trial began. They brought Day One to a private chamber. Inside was a holographic display showing his old life. His small quarters on the station, his quiet work in the agricultural dome, his peaceful, solitary existence. Then the display changed. It showed credits being transferred to an account. Enough money to buy a ship, to travel anywhere he wanted. It showed a release form, already prepared, that would free him from all responsibilities to Tyel and the Talvari Empire. "You have sacrificed much," Vara said. She was in the chamber with him, along with the elders. "Your privacy, your peace, your simple life, all taken from you because you showed kindness to a stranger. We offer you a choice. Sign the release. Take the credits. Return to the life you had, or start a new one, anywhere you wish. No shame will come to you. No dishonor. You will be free." Day One looked at the display. He thought about how easy his life had been before Tyel, how uncomplicated, How safe. Then he thought about Tael's first night in his quarters, curled up on the pillow, trusting him completely. He thought about the hatchling's nightmares, and the way only Day One's presence could calm them. He thought about the feel of emotions flowing through the bond, the connection that had become as natural as breathing. He looked at Vara. "Where is Tael now?" "Waiting outside," she replied. "Is he scared?" "Very much so." Day One smiled sadly. "Then my answer is no. He's not my responsibility. He's my family. And you don't abandon family for money, or convenience, or an easier life." He saw approval in Vara's eyes, though she said nothing. The elders nodded among themselves. "The human passes the second trial," Elder Kyra announced. Crix stood abruptly. "This proves nothing. Words are easy. The final trial will reveal the truth. The third trial was the most dangerous." Day One and Tael were brought to a place called the Chamber of Souls, a sacred temple deep within the floating city. The chamber was circular, with walls that seemed to be made of liquid starlight. "Inside this chamber, your bond will be tested by the ancient guardians," Vara explained. "You will face visions designed to break your connection. If your bond is false, if it is weak or built on selfish foundations, you will both die. If your bond is true, you will emerge together, and Prince Tael's scales will show the royal colors for the first time." Day One knelt down and looked Tael in the eyes. The young prince was trembling. "Hey," Day One said softly. "Look at me. Whatever happens in there, we stay together. Right?" Tael chirped and pressed his head against Day One's chest. "Together," Day One repeated. They entered the chamber hand in claw. Inside, reality twisted. Day One saw his family, his parents, and sister, standing before him. But they weren't happy to see him. They looked angry. "You replaced us," his sister said, "with an alien monster. You forgot about us." "No," Day One said, his voice breaking. "I could never forget you." "Then why did you let him into your heart?" his mother asked. Day One felt tears on his face. "Because holding on to grief was killing me. Because he needed me. Because love isn't finite. I can miss you and still care for him." The vision wavered. Beside him, Tael was facing his own nightmare. The hatchling saw himself grown into a mighty emperor, powerful and respected. But the vision of Day One beside him was small and old and weak. "You don't need him anymore," a voice whispered. "You are strong. You are royal. He is just a human. Let him go." Tael made a distressed sound and reached out. "Need him," the hatchling said. His first human words, broken and rough. "Need Day One." Both visions shattered like glass. In the center of the chamber, Day One and Tael found each other. Day One grabbed the young prince and held him close. Through the bond came a flood of emotions so intense it brought Day One to his knees. Love, trust, fear, hope, all mixing together until he couldn't tell where his feelings ended and Tael's began. Light exploded around them. Tael's scales blazed with color, brilliant golds and deep purples and shimmering silvers. The royal colors, marking him as the true heir. When they emerged from the chamber, the entire tribunal was waiting. Thousands of Talvari had gathered to see the result. Vara stood from her throne, her expression solemn. "The chamber has spoken. The bond is true and unbreakable. Day One of Earth, you are recognized as the bonded guardian of Prince Tael. The tribunal is concluded." But before anyone could celebrate, alarms began to sound throughout the city. Crix's followers had staged a coup, using the tribunal as a distraction. They were attempting to seize control of the capital and eliminate Tael before he could take his place as heir. The palace shook with explosions. Day One grabbed Tael and ran, following Elder Kyra through corridors that twisted and turned in ways that made no sense to his human mind. Behind them, they could hear weapons, fire, and shouting. "Crix planned this," Elder Vin growled as he ran beside them. his own weapon drawn. He knew he would lose the tribunal, so he prepared a backup plan. He wants to kill Tile and install his own offspring as heir. They rounded a corner and nearly ran into a group of Crix's soldiers. Elder Vin moved faster than Day One thought possible, his weapon flashing. The soldiers fell before they could raise their own guns. This way, Kira urged, leading them down a side passage. Day One's heart was pounding. Tile clung to his chest, sending waves of fear through the bond. But also something else. The young prince's mind was working, processing, analyzing. His empathic abilities had grown stronger since the Chamber of Souls. He could sense danger before it appeared. Left, Tile suddenly chirped, his voice urgent. Day One didn't question it. He pulled Kira to the left, down a different corridor. Seconds later, an explosion ripped through the passage they would have taken. Kira stared at Tail in amazement. He knew. He can feel them, Day One said, understanding flooding through the bond. He can sense their intentions through the walls. They used Tile's ability to navigate the palace, avoiding Crix's forces and making their way toward the communication center. If they could send a distress signal, loyal forces could respond, but they were trapped in a hostile building with enemies everywhere. Day One's mind raced. He was an agricultural engineer, not a soldier. But he understood systems, understood how things worked. The palace was a system, just like the hydroponics he worked with. It had flows and connections and weak points. The ventilation shafts, he said suddenly. Are they large enough for us to crawl through? Elder Vin looked at him with new respect. Yes. But they are not shielded. Anyone monitoring the palace systems would see us. Not if we trigger a system-wide diagnostic, Day One said. It would flood the monitors with false readings. Give us maybe 5 minutes of cover. Kira smiled. Do it. They found an access panel. Day One's hands shook as he worked, pulling on everything Bo-Ra had taught him about Talvari technology. He initiated a full diagnostic sweep of the palace environmental systems. Alarms began blaring, but not the combat alarms. These were maintenance warnings that would seem like a malfunction. They climbed into the ventilation system. Day One went first, carrying Tael, with the elders following behind. The shafts were tight and uncomfortable, but they led toward the communication center. They were halfway there when Tael suddenly went rigid. Stop, he said in his broken human speech. Danger close. Through a vent grating, they could see into a large chamber. General Crix stood there, with a dozen of his best soldiers, setting up some kind of device. Once this is activated, Crix was saying, it will send a pulse through the entire palace. Anyone with royal blood will be eliminated instantly. The line of succession will be broken, and the council will have no choice but to accept my claim. Day One felt cold fury rise in his chest. They had to stop him, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. He looked at Elder Vin, who was already calculating angles and odds. The old warrior shook his head slightly. They couldn't win a direct fight, but they didn't need to fight. They needed to buy time. Day One pulled out his personal communicator. It didn't have the range to reach beyond the palace, but it could reach local systems. He sent an emergency message to the one place he thought might help, New Haven Colony. Director Hajun. He didn't know if the message would get through. He didn't know if anyone would respond even if it did. But it was their only chance. We need to slow them down, he whispered to Elder Vin. Keep them busy until help arrives. If help arrives, the old warrior grinned, showing sharp teeth. They dropped from the ventilation shaft into the chamber. Weapons raised. Crix's soldiers spun around in surprise. The fight was brief and brutal. Elder Vin fought with the skill of someone who had survived 1,000 battles. Elder Kyra used her staff to channel energy that sent soldiers flying, but they were still outnumbered. Day One had never held a weapon before, but he grabbed a fallen soldier's gun and did his best. Mostly, he focused on keeping Tael safe, using his own body as a shield. Crix himself moved toward them, his own weapon aimed at Tael. "It ends now?" he snarled. Tael stepped forward, away from Day One's protection. The young prince's scales blazed with royal colors, and his eyes held a fierce intelligence. "No," Tael said clearly. "You end." The hatchling's empathic abilities exploded outward. Every person in the room felt it. A wave of pure emotion that showed them Tael's determination, his courage, his absolute refusal to let his people be harmed by Crix's ambition. Several of Crix's soldiers lowered their weapons, shaking their heads as if waking from a dream. They had joined Crix, believing he wanted to save the Empire from weakness, but feeling Tael's strength, his genuine care for his people, they realized they had been wrong. Crix roared in anger and aimed his weapon at Tael. Day One threw himself between them, just as he had with the falling sculpture. The blast hit him square in the chest, and he went down hard. The last thing he heard before darkness took him was Tael's anguished cry. He woke in a medical facility, his chest wrapped in bandages, and his whole body aching. Tael was curled up beside the bed, his small, clawed hand holding Day One's. Through the bond came relief so intense it was almost painful. "What happened?" Day One croaked. Elder Kyra appeared in his field of vision. "Your message reached Director Hajun. He contacted us immediately, and also dispatched a human security force. They arrived within 30 minutes of your call. Jae-hwan was with them." "Jae-hwan?" Day One was confused. "But he hated me." "He had a change of heart," Kyra said with a smile. "Apparently hearing that you were in danger made him realize that his resentment was foolish. General Crix has been defeated and imprisoned. His coup has failed." Tael chirped and pressed closer to Day One. The hatchling's eyes were full of tears. "Hey," Day One said softly, running his hand over Tael's scales. "I'm okay. See? Still here." Empress Dowager Vara entered the room then. She moved with the grace of someone far younger than her ancient years. "You nearly died protecting my grandson," she said. "A human, standing against our greatest warriors, without hesitation." "He's my family," Day One said simply. "That's what family does," Vara nodded slowly. "Yes, and it is time our empire understood what that truly means. I am stepping down as Empress Dowager. Tael will begin his reign as prince in training, with you as his regent and guide until he reaches maturity." Day One tried to sit up. "But he's still so young." "He is young," Vara agreed. "But he has you. And together, you will learn what it means to lead. Not through strength alone, but through compassion, through understanding, through the bonds that connect all beings, regardless of species." 2 weeks later, Day One stood in the great throne room of Talvaris. His chest still ached where the blast had hit him, but he refused to miss this moment. He wore clothes that were a blend of human and Talvari design, formal but comfortable. Beside him stood Tael, who had grown noticeably in just the past few weeks. The young prince's scales shimmered with brilliant golds and purples, and his eyes held a wisdom that seemed impossible for one so young. The throne room was filled with representatives from dozens of species, humans from New Haven Colony, including Director Ha-jun and Jae-hwan, who had apologized profusely for his earlier behavior, Talvari from across the Empire, and observers from other civilizations, all curious to witness this historic moment. Elder Kyra stepped forward, carrying 2 circlets. The first was traditional, made of living crystal that had been grown over centuries specifically for this purpose. She placed it carefully on Tael's head. "Prince Tael," she announced, her voice carrying through the chamber. "Heir to the throne, chosen by the cosmos itself." The assembled witnesses bowed their heads in respect. Then Kira lifted the second circlet. This one was different, made of woven metals from both Earth and Talvar Prime, created specifically for this occasion. She turned to Day One. "For 3,000 years, we believed that strength came from standing alone," Kira said. That worthiness meant surviving without help. But day one of Earth showed us a different truth. He showed us that true strength comes from connection, from choosing to care even when it costs us, from building bridges instead of walls. She placed the circlet on Daewon's head. Today we do not simply crown a prince, Kira continued, her voice thick with emotion. We acknowledge a truth older than our laws. That compassion knows no species. That family is not bound by blood alone. That the future belongs to those who bridge divides, rather than enforce them. The room erupted in cheers. Talvari and humans alike celebrating together. Vara stepped forward and embraced both Daewon and Tael. You have taught this old empire a valuable lesson, she said quietly. You have reminded us that sometimes the greatest courage is simply choosing to care. Later, as the formal ceremony gave way to celebration, Daewon and Tael slipped away to a balcony overlooking the city. The twin moons of Talvar Prime were rising, casting silver light across the floating metropolis. In the distance, they could see the lights of the human embassy district, recently expanded to accommodate the growing alliance between their peoples. Tael leaned against Daewon's side, his breathing steady and calm. Through the bond came contentment, hope, and love. What happens now? Tael asked, his human speech much improved. Daewon smiled and wrapped his arm around the young prince's shoulders. Now? We have years before you take full power. Years to learn and grow, and figure out what kind of leader you want to be. Will you stay? Tael asked quietly. The whole time? Every single day. Daewon promised. We're family, Tael. That doesn't change, just because you're a prince. I'll be here for as long as you need me. Forever then, Tael said simply. Daewon laughed. Yeah, forever. They stood together on the balcony, a human and an alien prince, watching the moons rise over a city that represented the beginning of something new. An alliance not built on politics or strategy, but on the simple truth that kindness could change the course of history. Behind them, in the throne room, humans and Talvari celebrated together. Jaehwan was deep in conversation with Elder Vin, comparing battle stories. Director Hajun was being taught traditional Talvari dances by a patient instructor. Bora was showing human children holographic displays of Talvari history. Two peoples, coming together because one person chose compassion over indifference. Because one man decided that a scared, hurt hatchling deserved help. Regardless of the consequences, the future was uncertain. There would be challenges ahead, political complications, cultural misunderstandings, and growing pains as two civilizations learned to work together. But for now, in this moment, everything was perfect. Tael made a soft, happy sound and settled more comfortably against Daewon's side. Through the bond came a feeling of absolute peace. Daewon looked up at the stars, thinking about the journey that had brought him here. From a lonely agricultural engineer running from his past to the regent of an alien prince and a bridge between two worlds. It seemed impossible. It seemed like something from a dream, but it was real. And it was his life now. Come on, he said, gently guiding Tael back toward the celebration. We should get back before they send someone looking for us. Together? Tael asked. Always together, Daewon confirmed. Hand in claw, they walked back into the light and noise of the celebration, ready to face whatever the future held. Because they had something stronger than tradition, stronger than law, stronger than any weapon or strategy. They had each other, and that was enough.